Valeria and the Enemy of Time, Chapter 4. Be nice, Borchan. Don't scare her, a soft voice said. Come on out now, Valeria. No use hiding. Then I noticed 3 figures standing near the glowing object. They were dark-skinned and wearing deep purple caftans. I was so distracted by the light that I hadn't even seen them. I flipped open the blade of my pocket knife and extended it out. I said nothing. Come, come. The 3rd figure's voice was brusque, and I thought it might belong to a woman. You may think we have all day, but time is a funny thing, and we've spent a lot of it already. There was no use hiding any more, so I put on the most deadly scowl I could muster, even though I was shaking inside, and stepped forward. I could see my white knuckles tremble as I held the blade out. I used my other hand to steady it. I crouched and waited. What do you want with me? I snarled. The 3rd figure crossed her arms in front of her body and looked at one of her companions, then the next. She had a smug look on her face. Yes, Morna, you picked well, said Amina. She can handle it, I think. Borchan said, Yes, I thought she might be too young, but I might have been wrong, perhaps. Quit talking about me like I'm not here, I said. Who are you and what have you done to me? Yes, enough time wasted. I am Morna, the elder of our sub-council. Come here. You can put that knife back in your pocket now. We aren't here to harm you. At least not directly, muttered Borchan. Shh, let Morna talk, hissed Amina. You couldn't hurt us even if you tried, so come over here, have a seat. Morna patted a gray blob until it was the right height for me to sit on. Do you want something to eat? I have some of these delicious orange fruits I can offer you, though I think they might taste better if they are peeled. I shook my head and put my knife away, but I kept my hand on it just in case. The 3 figures looked like people, but at the same time they didn't. Their skin was dark, which wasn't unusual, but it seemed more shiny and, well, rich somehow. They all had short black curly hair, and all 3 were tall and slim, but their eyes didn't look right, flickering with hints of orange red. Either the color in them was all messed up, or the light from their star was playing tricks with the reflections, and they were a little too tall. How do you know my name? I asked. We know much, said Borchan. Though not all, said Amina. But enough, said Morna. Let me begin by introducing ourselves. We are the wise ones. Wait, is that what we decided? Asked Amina. I thought we voted for the guiders. Borchan rolled his eyes. That didn't have a good ring to it. While you were off with your pet pony, Morna and I voted for the wise ones. You may have heard of us, or not. I was sure I had not, especially since they had obviously just decided what to call themselves. We are not human, as you yourself are. My knees started bouncing. My nerves had been all worked up, and now they needed an outlet. Morna continued explaining. This planet you call Earth has our special affection. We are tied to it by our own wills and the will of those greater than us. We care about what happens here. We watch the life forms develop and grow. We watch them turn to good. We watch them turn to evil. But in spite of evil, good always springs from the rock, splitting it with the gentle forces of growth and goodness. Are you good? I asked. Do you change things by getting rid of evil people and replacing them with good ones? Because if so, then you haven't done that great of a job. No, we cannot do that. We are not allowed to interfere with the destiny of the human race. We are only observers. We have a small power to lend influence to those who are mindful, those who seek truth and light. But to step in and change the choices that humans make, to alter the random chances that the earth gives birth to in its spin through the solar system, no. We would have the best intentions, but that would cause our downfall. The three stood silently for a moment. Are you thinking of Soli and her planet? Amina said in a low voice to Morna. Borchan looked off into the distance. Morna frowned at Amina, then looked back at me. It is not possible to predict what change that each event, large or small, would bring about in the future. To go about tangling the threads, even with the best intentions, could cause the destruction of humanity. To lift ourselves, the wise ones, up to the role of decision makers for the people, even with the intent of bringing about good, would destroy us. Those are our two rules we live by, said Morna. I thought we'd decided to call them suggestions, said Borchan. I'm sure I remember there were 3 rules, said Amina. Morna ignored them. I wasn't afraid of the 3 anymore. They sort of reminded me of the Greek gods we studied in school. Sort of powerful, sort of not. Except these wise ones seemed to have a better opinion of humans than the Greek gods had. My confidence rose. Wait a minute, I said. What about this Soli person? And what happened to her planet? Amina looked sad, but the other 2 had guarded expressions I couldn't read. Soli was one of our kind, Morna said, without emotion. She was very wise and very powerful. And Soli was good. She meant well, Amina added. When she began to meddle with her planet's timeline, trying to improve the evolution of the inhabitants, her people, as she regarded them, odd things started to happen. Morna looked as if she couldn't decide whether to say more. What odd things? I asked, curious. Every day that passed became more and more unpredictable. Borchan took up the story. He wasn't hesitant. Mothers would wake up and their children would never have been born. Sometimes they remembered, sometimes they forgot. Cities appeared and disappeared overnight. Strange diseases flashed through a country, wiping out the population. Even while scientists were trying to analyze the sickness, those killed by it began to reappear, alive again, in other parts of the world. Their astronauts visited their moons until they couldn't, because their spaceships were unmade. Only those who forgot stayed sane. Borchan's voice turned harsh. But it was when the children began to be born different, unevolved, you might say, that the head council stepped in to stop it. She meant well, Amina softly repeated. She was warned, Borchan retorted. The others should have warned her, Amina said. That's why there are always 4. The other 3 just stood back and let her do that, without helping her to see what she was doing. I know she was your special friend, Amina, but she knew better. Look at Morna. Soli was Morna's sister. She's not defending her. There was no excuse. Morna snapped her head back at Borchan. Never bring that up. You have no right. Something Amina had said bugged me. 4? What do you mean there are always 4? There are only 3 of you. Where's the other one? I asked. There was dead silence. With an effort, Morna regained her expression of calm control. You may think we are always in agreement, that we always work as one toward our goal, she said. I actually did not think that, but I kept silent. It is true, there were 4 of us. The 4th is no longer with us. There was rebellion. We followed our directive, and now we are the 3. What happened to the 4th? I was curious. Expelled, Amina whispered. Dead, Borchan spoke over her. That is not a matter for humans, Morna said dismissively. I could tell I wasn't going to get more from them on the subject, so I returned to the present. What do you want from me? I asked. You brought me here for a reason. Yes, Amina said, the task. Bring the tapestry, demanded Morna. She traced an outline in the air, and a gray rod appeared, hovering just above her head. Amina and Borchan stepped into the glowing star and returned, carrying a big roll. I could see that it was made of fabric, sort of like a rug, but more shimmery and delicate. They brought it over to Morna, and then they hefted it, all 3 of them, bringing the loose edge up to the horizontal rod. It attached itself, and Borchan gave it a little shake, smoothing it as it sprang open from the roll, quivering and shimmering in the still air. All of them gathered around it, Morna and Amina stroking it tenderly. I gaped. The tapestry was the most beautiful object I'd ever seen. It had been woven with an azure base color, the shade the sky is when it is at its most clear and beautiful blue that it can ever be. When I moved my eyes across it, the color shifted to a dusky purplish blue, like a clear twilight evening. Greens had been woven in, the greens of 1,000,000 forests, more leafy and grassy and piney than I even knew existed. I peered deeper. Gold threads were embroidered along silver ones, miniature castles rising on little hilltops. Roads and rivers and kingdoms flowed over the surface of the intricately woven fabric. It seemed to hum with energy, and small flickers of light crackled here and there. Tiny figures of people were sewn in, going about their daily errands, having babies, shoeing horses, watching television. I had a sudden urge to see if Mom and Sean were embroidered into the scene, watching Doctor Who with bowls of popcorn on their laps. Yes, Borchan said, it's your world. A representation, said Amina. We study it. We have learned so much about humans. Even though they looked so much the same, the wise ones were different from each other. I decided I liked Amina. Her words were soft and kind. Borchan was grumpy, and Morna intimidated me. Who made it? I asked. But even as I spoke, I could see tiny, almost invisible threads weaving and moving as layers were added, and the size of the piece increased and seemed to fold back on itself. The sweet little milkmaid I had been looking at disappeared behind a small cottage. I was finding it difficult to focus on it, and I had to shut my eyes to keep from getting dizzy. It was started by those who are over us, Morna said, and it is renewed by you and your kind. Look here, how the pattern all works out. She pointed to one area that at first seemed a foreboding greenish-gray color. All the figures seemed sort of spiky, and when I touched it, I felt a whisper of sadness brush the end of my fingertips, but the scene gradually swirled and mixed into the surrounding patterns, becoming a delicate shade of aquamarine and topaz, breathing, understanding sorrow, and I felt a touch of grace. A spray of tiny black teardrops marred the margin of the transformed picture, but I could see how that contrast gave the field more beauty and how the black drops had not been erased, but surrounded and contained. You see, Morna continued, this is beyond our power to create. Who would have thought of this design? And yet, it's beautiful. I could have stood in front of the tapestry for hours, for days, just gazing at it. Then Borchan spoke up. Show her, now. Morna waved her arms over her head, twisting them around, her long fingers doing a slow dance. The tapestry began rotating until its back was facing them. It was still beautiful, but in a different way, more random. It reminded me of the view from Rocky Hill, driving down into town in the evening. All the street lights and traffic lights were laid out below us, yellow, red, green, and white, and also the neon store signs so far away you couldn't read them. It was a beautiful but unfocused view. It was my hometown, so I knew which one was Frank's Liquor, which one was Nichols Payless, and which block had the blue flashing police lights. The wise ones were quiet, waiting. I didn't know what they wanted from me. I looked up at them, but they just stood there watching me. Then I saw it. I saw the flaw. A thick black thread had been untied from its backing and carelessly slung over about a hand's width to another patch of color, where it had been tied on with a granny knot. Another black thread coming from the same dark patch had been pulled loose and cut off. About 3 inches of it hung down, frayed at the end. It was a small thing, but it was an ugly blemish, a flaw so out of place that it marred the whole area. Fix it, I said. We can't, Borchan said. Don't you understand? This is not a piece of carpet to be put back together by an upholsterer. This is a representation of your world's timeline. This, what you see here, he gestured at the tapestry. This is not Earth hanging on a rod, a plaything to toy with. This piece only shows what is already happening on Earth. We don't know how this happened. We've been following the creation of this work for many thousands of years. We've seen times, have seen people who needed our encouragement, our wisdom, our guidance to choose the path of righteousness and truth. That's why I wanted the guiders, Amina whispered to Morna. Sometimes we were able to help and sometimes we were not, but still the times moved on in one direction. Kingdoms rose, kingdoms fell. People were cruel, and then they gained understanding, and their souls grew. Some lost their souls. What Borchan is trying to say, said Morna, is that someone or something is messing with the timeline and we don't know who it is or why they've done it. I saw Borchan's mouth open and shut a couple of times and thought he was trying to say a lot more than that, and I could tell he was just getting warmed up with his speech. But I'd gotten the gist of it and was glad Morna cut him off and got to the point. Something like this did happen once before, about 100 years ago, continued Morna. 150, said Borchan, still miffed at having his speech cut short. About 100 years ago, repeated Morna, we brought out the tapestry to see if there was someone who needed our guidance. Our wisdom, she emphasized. Something just didn't feel right, and Amina thought to look at the back. We saw a tiny thread that had been broken and retied, We didn't know what it meant. We talked about it, thought about it, asked our brethren about it, but no one knew. Finally, when we turned it back over to the right side, Morna paused and looked at Borchin, who said the tapestry had changed. Borchin had been studying it and trying to understand how he could help a poor woman who had an unbearable life choice to make. He could see the threads were preparing to weave a path of light and greatness in her life to come. It was in her chosen destiny, but he hoped he could increase the brightness of her flame with... When we turned it over, Borchan interrupted, his voice rough. Her shining path was gone. The threads were no longer silky and bright, but coarse and dull. The colors around her were muted. The stream that we had seen flowing from her was gone. That sounds disappointing, I said, but people make their own choices, right? So maybe she chose the wrong thing and it didn't turn out all right. But still, people have free will to choose, even if it isn't what the wise ones want. She doesn't understand, murmured Amina. Child, the threads that had been changed had already happened. This evildoer has changed a bit of the past to change the future. That is not allowed, Morna exclaimed. That is dangerous. The past has already been woven. The present is allowed its turn. This is the opposite of free will. This is a manipulation that cannot be allowed to stand. At first we hoped it was just a glitch, a mistake somehow. Then we hoped that something so small would not make that significant a difference. She paused. But it did. What happened to the woman? I asked quietly. She died. Actually, she was never born. So, Amina said, when we found these new tied off and broken black threads, we turned the tapestry back over and saw a sort of fading that was happening hundreds of years ago, affecting events that should have been beyond effect. We knew our enemy was becoming bolder. Yes, he or it is our enemy. The attack was very precise. We could see exactly what the intent was, and the intent was not for good. Why did you pick me to help you? I asked, confused. Morna raised her arms again and made circles with her fingers. The tapestry swung back around to the front side. She looked at me with her beautiful, deep, bluish, amber, inhuman eyes and waved me in closer. I bent in to look at the place she was pointing to in the shimmering fabric. There was a little girl, delicately embroidered in the midst of a grove of orange trees. The green leaves seemed to wave in a secret breeze. It was spring, and the trees were in full bloom. A delicious scent rose in wisps from the cloth, the aroma of orange blossoms. I looked more closely at the little girl. I could see her pale skin and jet black hair, and when the tiny figure turned, a little white widow's peak flashed like silver. The little girl was holding a glowing object in her hands, and she was turning in a slow circle. A very thin thread, as thin as spider silk, ran across the landscape and the centuries behind her until it disappeared into the yarns of the piece that had been tampered with. 3 other embroidered figures stood in a protective circle around the girl. I recognized the wise ones. So you see, said Morna, we found her in the tapestry, in the edge where the present is being built out of future longings, and then we looked for her until we found you. You are the one who can right this wrong. How? I asked. I was tired and thirsty by now, and I couldn't decide whether to laugh at the whole crazy idea or to be scared. You'll go back. You'll go back to that time and make sure that what was supposed to happen does happen. Why can't you? You're the wise ones after all. I hated how whiny my voice sounded, but I wasn't able to control it. We told you, Borchan said. We can't. It's not allowed. And if we did, it's a strong likelihood we would make it worse because of what we are. Don't yell, Borchan, Amina said. The poor thing is getting tired. Valeria, we will send you a token. It will take you to where you need to be. We will give you all the information we can to help you be successful. We will try to guide you. What about the enemy person thing? I felt like I was about to fall asleep. We will be trying to find out what it is and why it is doing this. Be assured. Their voices were soothing. Can Theo come with me? I asked. The three looked at each other. He's not in the story, said Borchan. But he's not in the story, said Amina. Still, a companion is not a bad idea, mused Morna. In all the great epics there is a companion. David had his Jonathan. Sir Edmund Hillary had his Tenzing Norgay. Johnny Carson had his Ed McMahon. And Frodo had his Samwise Gamgee, Amina blurted out, eyes shining. That's fiction, dear Amina, said Borchan. What does that matter? Amina said. Theo may accompany you, as long as he is with you when the token is used. Now, Morna spoke up, we must get you back to your home and to bed. It is late. Morna and Amina each took me by the hand, and we followed Borchan as he waved tendrils of fog out of our way. After a short while, we reached the sidewalk, and they waited while I walked through the kitchen door. By then, I was stumbling. I was so tired. I felt as if I'd been up all night long, but Mom and Sean were still sitting in front of the TV, watching the regeneration of the Sixth Doctor on Doctor Who, and Theo had apparently decided to work some more on the birthday cake. You were gone longer than I expected, he said. Where are the oranges? I just stared at him, my mouth open without words to fill it. I almost laughed at the impossibility of answering, but my throat closed up, so I snapped my mouth shut. Valeria, are you okay? His brown eyes were puzzled, and he looked closely at me. He knew how to read me, but I wasn't ready yet. A knock at the door saved me. Theo, it's your mother, called Mom. Tomorrow after school, meet me, Clubhouse 3 and 22, I said as he grabbed his cake and jacket, giving him the address of the tree he should come to. I'll tell you everything then. You won't believe it. And Theo, I said, we are so going to start wearing our survival packs. And that's the end of Chapter 4. Subscribe and meet me back here again for Chapter 5 of Valeria and the Enemy of Time.